When I moved into the complex, I found out too late that my new neighbor had already bought every single parking space in the place. Lucius Armstrong had spent $2 million locking them all down. If anyone wanted to park, they had to rent from him for $5,000 a month. I decided that was insane, and parked on the vacant lot outside the complex instead. The next morning, I walked out and found Lucius slapping a ticket on my windshield. When he saw me, he smiled. "Don't want to rent from me? Then pay $500 a day in tickets. We'll see who lasts longer." Then he turned and started ticketing the other residents, too. That was when I opened the residents group chat and typed. I did the math. Renting from him makes less sense than all of us pulling money to build our own parking lot. Who's in? Watching the replies flood in, I smiled. Now we'd see who outlasted who. "What gives you the right to ticket my car?" I gripped the $500 citation and stared at Lucius coldly. He still held a thick stack of identical tickets. "What gives me the right?" He looked me up and down with open contempt. "I do part-time work for traffic enforcement. And your junk car is parked where it shouldn't be." I forced down my anger. "This is the empty lot outside the complex. There's no parking sign and I'm not blocking traffic. You're a part-timer. What authority do you have to write tickets on your own?" Lucius stepped closer. "Caroline Swanson. There are no white lines here. That means this isn't a legal parking spot. Every ticket I write is legitimate." He flicked the paper in my hand. "If you don't want to pay, fine. But once enough violations stack up, they get posted publicly and put on record. Then your name goes right up on the traffic enforcement website. If that reaches your workplace, that won't look very good. Will it?" I clenched my jaw. A few residents had gathered nearby. They looked at the ticket in my hand with the same helpless fury on their faces. Allison Ball, one of the neighbors I knew fairly well, pushed through the crowd and tugged on my sleeve. "Caroline, let it go. He's not someone we can afford to cross." Lowering her voice, she added, "Everybody parks outside. He's been going car to car all morning. He's already tagged more than a dozen." I looked over and saw the same white slips under windshield wipers all along the curb. This wasn't enforcement. It was extortion. Lucius saw my expression darken and grinned wider. "What? Too expensive? Then rent one of my spaces. $5,000 a month and you'll park in peace. If you can't afford that, sell the car and take the bus." My fist tightened. But I knew there was nothing to gain from getting into it. With him here, if something this petty ended up attached to my public record, it would become a much bigger headache. I took a breath, folded the ticket and shoved it into my pocket. "Fine, I'll pay." Lucius turned away smugly and moved on to the next car I opened. The residents group chat messages were flying. Has Lucius Armstrong lost his mind? $5,000 a month is robbery. I parked outside today and got hit with $500, too. How is anyone supposed to live like this? The next day, I deliberately found a public street space with white lines painted on it and parked there. That evening, I came back to another ticket. I waited for Lucius and stepped right into his path. I parked in a public space with white lines. "What gives you the right to ticket me now?" He had been humming to himself on his way upstairs. When he saw the ticket in my hand, he didn't look surprised at all. "Caroline Swanson, is your memory that bad?" He pointed toward the street. "Didn't I tell you yesterday? If you don't rent from me, you pay every day." I drove 2 streets over on purpose. I parked in a public spot inside city markings. "That's not your property and it's not illegal parking. So what gives you the right?" Lucius sneered, handed the seafood he was carrying to the 2 men behind him, and slowly pulled out a document. "Because that space is mine, too." He unfolded it in front of me. It had an official-looking red seal document. Stated that every public parking space within 10 miles of the complex had been contracted under Haven Property Management, with Lucius Armstrong listed as the responsible party. "Understand now?" He tucked it away. "Every public space for 10 miles around is under me. You parked on my turf without paying rent. $500 is me being generous." I stared at him. "Public parking is a city resource. How could it possibly be contracted to you personally? That document has to be fake." His face went cold. "Watch your mouth. Black and white, official seal. And you still call it fake?" He leaned in. "If I see your car on my turf again tomorrow, $500 won't be enough." By the time I got home, I was furious enough to sit down with a calculator. $500 a day came to $15,000 a month. Renting one of Lucius's spaces cost $5,000. Either way, he was bleeding residents dry. Even if I could afford it, I refused to swallow something this outrageous. That night, Allison messaged me. "Caroline, did he ticket you again? I just saw him outside tagging more cars." I replied, "Yes." Says every spot for 10 miles around is under his contract. She sent back an angry sticker. There's no way to live like this. There's nowhere left to park. The next day, I went straight to the management office. You sold every parking space in this complex to one person, I said, staring across the desk at property manager Clark Perry. Do you honestly think that's reasonable? Clark brushed it off. Miss Swanson, that's not how to frame it. The spaces are developer assets. If the developer wants to sell them as a package, that's not something property management controls. I slapped a hand on the desk. Can't control it. Then why wasn't there any advance notice in the residence chat? Why no grace period? Why transfer all of them at once? A mocking smile spread across his face. Mr. Armstrong had deep pockets and moved fast. He got there first. That's business. You were too slow. You got nothing. And now you're here making a scene. I looked at his smug expression and laughed coldly. Inside. Fine, free market. I'll accept that argument for the spaces inside the complex. But what about all the public parking outside? What gives him the right to wave around some document? Nobody can verify and collect fines from everyone? Clark's expression flickered. But he recovered quickly. Anything outside the complex is a matter for traffic enforcement. And the city. Why come to management? If you feel wronged, file a police report. He waved me off. That's enough. Miss Swanson. I'm busy. I held his gaze for a moment. Then turned and walked out. When I got home, the residence group chat was exploding. Property management is obviously in on it with Lucius Armstrong. I asked around. Clark Perry is Lucius Armstrong's uncle. No wonder he acts like this. And Allison posted a long message. Everyone, I had someone look into Lucius Armstrong. He's done this before at Fairmont Court next door. He bought every parking space the same way. Charged the same $5,000 a month and made the whole complex miserable. Complaints went nowhere. Because their property manager was also Clark Perry. That cleared everything up. This wasn't just greed. It was a family operation. I kept scrolling. Everyone was angry. Everyone was helpless. No one had a real solution. Since neither Lucius nor management was in the chat. People spoke freely. I typed. Everyone, give me a second. Let me run the numbers. Chat went silent. If you rent from him at $5,000 a month. That's $60,000 a year. That's money he's squeezing out of us on purpose. If we pull our money and build a parking lot nearby, the cost per person comes out cheaper than buying a single space. In this complex. The chat instantly exploded again. Build our own lot. Is that even possible? Where would we build it? Allison was the first to back me. I think Caroline's right. Why should we keep swallowing this? The people next door are sick of this, too. I'll add them. And we can all chip in. As more and more people agreed. I let out a slow breath. As long as we acted together, we wouldn't have to keep living under Lucius's thumb. Just when the fundraising was nearly complete, someone from the neighboring complex raised a problem. What about that empty piece of land between the two complexes? The owner is a complete mystery. Who do we even talk to? I heard Clark Perry's company tried to buy it before for expansion. And got rejected every time. I leaned back against my couch. Tapped the screen and replied. Don't worry, I can handle the land. I didn't explain that the land had been left to me by my grandfather. I'd kept it untouched for years as a keepsake. When Clark Perry had tried to buy it cheap before, I'd refused without a second thought. I never imagined that piece of land would become the key to getting all of us out from under Lucius. The next morning, I had barely reached the front gate when I ran into him. Lucius sneered the second he saw me. Well, if it isn't Swanson the savior. I hear you're gathering up a bunch of broke losers to build a new parking lot. My heart skipped. We had only discussed fundraising in the private group chat. How did he know? Was there a mole? Lucius saw the change in my face and smiled wider. What's wrong? Surprised, scared. Take my advice, Caroline. Stop dreaming. The owner of that lot is a ghost. Even my uncle can't get to him. You think you can? In the end, all of you will come crawling back to rent from me. Hearing that, I actually relaxed. So he knew about the plan. But he didn't think it was a threat. He was just waiting to watch us fail. I gave him one cold look and walked away. Back home, I went through the chat history. And quickly found the person feeding information to Clark Perry. I kicked them out, then created a brand new private group. Only residents who had already paid their share were added. I posted the new lot will take about 2 months to finish. For those 2 months, we'll need to spend a little money. Rent Lucius's spaces and batches and let him think our plan failed. If he drops his guard, everything goes smoother. The next day, I took a few resident representatives to rent spaces from Lucius. He looked at us and smiled with pure malice. So now you want spaces? Too late, Caroline. Weren't you the capable one? Weren't you building your own lot? Then his face turned vicious. You want to rent from me? Fine. But as the resident representative, you get on your knees, kowtow 3 times and apologize. If I'm in a good enough mood, maybe I'll rent to you. Disgust surged through me and I turned to leave. I don't want a space like this. I had barely moved when 2 of his men grabbed me by the shoulders and forced me down. My knees slammed against the hard floor. Pain shot through both legs. Lucius walked over and slapped me hard across the face. You little bitch. You want my spaces? And you still dare look at me like that? Let me tell you something. 5,000 won't get you anything. Now. If you want to rent today, it's 7,000 a month, 1 cent short. And you don't park at all. Allison's eyes turned red and she started forward. But I stopped her with a look. I bit through my lip and tasted blood. Then I raised my head and looked at him. Fine, 7,000. We paid 2 months' rent and walked out of the property office, with Lucius's wild laughter following us. 2 months later, our new parking lot was completed without a hitch. Lucius came to find me with a renewal contract in hand. Caroline, your 2 months are up. Time to renew. And if you miss the deadline this time next month, it goes up to 8,000. I looked at him and then I smiled. No need. We won't be parking in your spaces anymore. Lucius froze for a second, then burst into harsh laughter. Not with me. Then where exactly are you going? Don't tell me you're still fantasizing about that new parking lot. I pulled out the photos of the finished lot and held them up. You guessed right, I said. Our new parking lot is already built. The smile on Lucius's face finally cracked. Lucius's laughter died in his throat, the sound clipping off like a snapped twig. He snatched the photos from my hand, his manicured fingers trembling slightly as he brought them close to his face. The photos were clear, taken under the bright midday sun. They showed a freshly paved, asphalt black lot, neatly painted with crisp white lines. There were over 100 spaces, bordered by a clean chain-link fence and bright, modern LED security lights. At the entrance, a heavy steel gate stood ready, complete with an electronic keypad. Where the hell is this? Lucius's voice lost its booming authority, dropping into a harsh, raspy whisper. He stared at the images, his eyes darting across the background, trying to identify the surroundings. Then, his gaze locked onto the familiar brick facade of the Fairmont Court complex visible in the upper right corner of one photo. It's right next door, I said, my voice cool, level, and entirely devoid of the anger I'd spent 2 months suppressing. On the vacant lot. The one you said was owned by a ghost. That's impossible, Lucius hissed, his face flushed with a sudden, ugly red. That land belongs to a private estate. My uncle tried to buy it for 3 years. The owners wouldn't even take a meeting. You think you can just trespass and lay down asphalt? I'll have the city bulldoze this by tomorrow morning. They won't be bulldozing anything, Lucius, I replied, leaning slightly forward. The land belongs to the Swanson Family Trust. My grandfather left it to me. The permits are fully registered, the zoning is commercial use parking, and the property tax is paid up for the next 5 years. It is entirely legal, entirely private, and entirely out of your reach. Lucius took a half step back, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. The arrogant swagger he had worn like armor for months was suddenly gone, leaving him looking smaller, older, and deeply desperate. You. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You set me up. No, I said, tucking my hands into my pockets. You set yourself up. You bought every space in this complex for $2 million, thinking you had a monopoly. You forgot that monopolies only work when people don't have another choice. Behind Lucius, the heavy glass doors of the property management office slid open. Clark Perry stepped out, holding a folder, a smug look on his face. Lucius, did she sign the renewal? We need to get these processed before. Clark stopped mid-sentence, his eyes darting between his nephew's pale face and the photo still clutched in Lucius's hand. What's going on here? Clark demanded, his tone hardening as he walked over. Tell your uncle the good news, Lucius, I said with a faint smile. Or better yet, check the resident group chat. I think the notifications are already starting. Right on cue, Clark's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then it buzzed again. And again. A rapid, frantic succession of alerts that didn't stop. With a growing sense of dread, Clark pulled out his phone. I watched his eyes scan the screen. In the private chat, the one we had carefully built after purging his mole, the announcement had just gone live. Attention all residents. The Swanson community parking lot is now open. Monthly parking is $150. Security is active 24/7. Access codes will be sent to everyone who contributed to the fund. For those who didn't contribute, spaces are available for $200 a month. Please begin moving your vehicles immediately. $150? Clark whispered, his face turning the color of chalk. Everyone is going to leave. They're already leaving, Clark, I said softly. From the parking lot behind us, the sound of car engines starting began to echo. One by one, residents who had been forced to pay $5,000 a month, or who had been hiding their cars blocks away to avoid Lucius's fake tickets, were starting their engines. Allison Ball's silver sedan backed out of one of Lucius's premium spaces. As she drove past us toward the exit, she rolled down her window, looked directly at Lucius, and gave him a cheerful wave. Thanks for the 2 months, Lucius, she called out. But I think I'll take my business elsewhere. Lucius watched her go, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cords. You think you've won? He snarled, turning back to me, his eyes wild. You think a bunch of broke losers can run a business? I still own every spot in this building. I'll sue you for interference. I'll have my guys block your entrance. Try it, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Every square inch of that new lot is under high-definition surveillance, directly linked to a off-site security firm. And as for your guys, I looked at the 2 heavy-set men standing a few paces behind him, the same 2 men who had held me down while he slapped me. I'd suggest they start looking for new jobs. Because once the police finish reviewing the footage from 2 months ago, they're going to be very busy with assault charges. Lucius's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his face, before he masked it with rage. You have no proof, he spat. We'll see about that, I said. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit, leaving the uncle and nephew standing in the middle of their empty, expensive empire. The next 3 days were a masterclass in panic. By Friday evening, 90% of the residents had moved their vehicles to the Swanson lot. The main parking garage of our complex, which had once been a source of constant stress and bitter arguments, was now an eerie, silent cavern of empty concrete. Row after row of vacant spaces stretched out, punctuated only by the yellow lines Lucius had paid so much to control. From my balcony, I had a perfect view of both the complex garage and my grandfather's land. The contrast was beautiful. The Swanson lot was bustling with life. Neighbors were helping each other carry groceries from their cars, chatting near the gate, and laughing. For the first time since I had moved in, the community felt like a community again. But I knew Lucius wouldn't just sit quietly and watch his $2 million investment turn into a worthless tax write-off. He had taken out massive private loans to fund his sweep of the parking spaces, relying on the guaranteed $5,000 a month extortion fees to pay off the interest. With nearly all of his tenants gone overnight, his financial model was collapsing. On Saturday morning, Allison met me near the entrance of the new lot. She was holding a cup of coffee and looking anxious. Caroline, have you seen the street outside? She asked, pointing toward the main road. I walked to the fence and looked out. Along the public curb, where the city-painted white lines were, several large, rusted-out pickup trucks were parked bumper to bumper. They were positioned in a way that completely blocked the sight lines for anyone trying to exit our new parking lot. They're Lucius's, Allison said, her voice trembling. I saw his men parking them there at 3 in the morning. They didn't even get out of the trucks, they just left them there. And look at this. She handed me a piece of paper that had been taped to our main gate. It was a formal-looking notice, bearing the logo of Haven Property Management and signed by Clark Perry. Notice of violation. The entrance to the unregistered parking facility at Lot 402 violates municipal safety codes regarding high-traffic access points. All residents using this facility are subject to a $500 daily fine for operating vehicles in an unauthorized zone. Effective immediately. He's trying the same scare tactics, I muttered, ripping the notice off the gate and crumpling it up. He thinks he can use his uncle's position to legitimize his bullying. Is it true? Allison asked, her eyes wide with worry. Can they fine us? No, I said firmly. Clark Perry is a property manager for a private developer. He has absolutely zero municipal authority. He can't write city tickets, and he certainly can't declare a private lot illegal. But he's counting on the fact that most people don't know the difference between a property management notice and an official city citation. What about those trucks blocking the exit? Allison pointed to the rusted pickups. It's incredibly dangerous to pull out onto the main road now. You Can't see oncoming traffic at all. That's exactly what he wants. He wants an accident to happen so he can claim. Our lot is a safety hazard. I pulled out my phone. But he made one major mistake. What's that? He parked those trucks on a public street. I smiled, dialing a number I had kept in my contacts for the last 2 weeks. And the city of Westridge has very strict laws about abandoned commercial vehicles on residential roads. Within an hour, a heavy-duty city tow truck arrived, accompanied by a local transit authority officer. I walked out to meet them, showing the officer the registration for those specific commercial plates, which, after a quick search by the officer, turned out to be registered to a shell company owned by none other than Clark Perry. These vehicles had been parked within 15 feet of a commercial driveway, blocking the clear view triangle, the officer noted, writing clipboard notes with a satisfying click of his pen. And they're registered under a commercial license but parked in a residential zone overnight without a permit. Get M. hooked up. As the first truck was hoisted into the air, the front doors of the complex burst open. Lucius ran out, still wearing his silk pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled. Clark was right behind him, trying to tuck his shirt in as he ran. Stop. Stop right there. Lucius screamed at the tow truck driver. You can't tow those. Those are private property. The officer stepped in front of him, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. Sir, are you the owner of these vehicles? They belong to my company. Clark yelled, catching up and panting. I am the property manager for this district. We have a municipal agreement. I don't care if you're the mayor, sir, the officer said, his voice dry and unimpressed. These vehicles are violating 3 different city ordinances. They are obstructing a legal driveway and creating a severe traffic hazard. They're going to the impound lot. This is her fault. Lucius roared, pointing at me. She's running an illegal parking business. Why aren't you ticketing her? She's the one violating the law. The officer looked over at our new lot, then back at Lucius. That lot has a valid commercial permit issued by the city zoning board 2 weeks ago. I have a copy of the registry right here on my terminal. It's fully compliant. Your trucks, however, are not. Now step back, or I'll have you cited for interfering with an officer. Lucius looked like he was about to explode. His face went from red to a dark, bruised purple. He glared at me with a hatred so pure it felt physical. You think you're smart, Caroline, he whispered, stepping close enough that I could smell his stale breath. You think this is over? You're ruining me. You have any idea what those loans cost? I will tear your life apart before I let you take my money. I didn't take your money, Lucius, I said quietly, so only he could hear. You threw it away the second you decided to treat your neighbors like cattle. Now go. Buy some real clothes. You look ridiculous. The tow truck pulled away, dragging the first of his trucks with a loud metallic scrape. Lucius watched it go, his fists clenching so hard his knuckles turned white. With the trucks cleared, the Swanson lot was fully functional, but I knew this was only the first battle. Lucius and Clark were desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. That afternoon, I met with a legal consultant, a friend of my grandfather's, named Arthur Vance. We sat in a small cafe 3 blocks from the complex, the table covered in documents, tax records, and the stack of fake tickets Lucius had given me over the past 2 months. This is fascinating, Arthur said, adjusting his glasses as he examined the official document Lucius had shown me, the one claiming Haven property management had a contract for all public parking within 10 miles. This red seal is indeed official looking, but look at the registration number at the bottom. It doesn't correspond to any municipal contract. It's a standard business registration seal for a private management firm. So it's completely fake? I asked. Not fake in the sense that the paper doesn't exist, Arthur explained. But entirely fraudulent in its application. Clark Perry used his position as property manager to draft a zone management agreement between his own shell company and Haven Property Management. He then stamped it with his company's corporate seal to make it look like a government document. It's a classic bluff. He has absolutely no legal right to patrol public streets or issue city-enforced citations. And the part-time traffic enforcement job Lucius claimed to have? Arthur pulled up a file on his tablet. I checked with the local precinct. Lucius Armstrong was hired as a temporary, part-time parking enforcement aide 3 years ago. He was fired after 4 weeks for conduct unbecoming, specifically, trying to extort local business owners. He kept the uniform and the ticket book. He's been using expired, non-sequential municipal citation forms. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, mixed with a deep sense of satisfaction. So every single ticket he wrote, every $500 fine he threatened us with, it was completely illegal. It was extortion and impersonation of a public official. Exactly, Arthur said, leaning back. In the eyes of the law, this isn't a civil dispute about parking anymore. This is a criminal conspiracy. But we have to be careful, Caroline. If we go to the police now with just these tickets, Clark might find a way to distance himself and throw Lucius under the bus. We need to tie them together. We need to prove Clark was using the property management company's funds and authority to back Lucius's play. How do we do that? The bank accounts, Arthur said. When you paid the $7,000 for those 2 months of parking, where did the money go? Did you pay in cash, or by check? I paid by certified check, I said. And I made sure to write parking fee. Space 44 foot in the memo line. I have the bank records showing which account it was deposited into. Arthur's eyes lit up. Excellent. Let me run a trace on that account routing number. If that money went into a personal account or an unregistered entity, rather than the developer's official corporate account, we have them on embezzlement and fraud. As I walked back to the complex, my mind was racing. The trap was set, but we needed to keep the pressure on. When I reached the front gate, I noticed a group of residents gathered around the main lobby doors. There was a lot of shouting and angry gestures. I hurried over to see what was happening. Clark Perry was standing at the glass doors, which had been locked from the inside. A chain and padlock were wrapped around the handles. What is the meaning of this? Allison was yelling, gesturing at the locked doors. Why is the lobby locked? Our mailboxes are in there. The laundry room is in there. This area is closed for maintenance, Clark said coldly through a small gap in the door. Due to a sudden deficit in the building's operational budget, we've had to reduce staff and close non-essential communal areas. Until the building's revenue stabilizes, these facilities will remain locked. Budget deficit, another neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, cried out. We all pay our monthly HOA dues. That covers maintenance. The HOA dues only cover basic upkeep, Clark sneered, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. The developer relies on parking garage revenue to fund the lobby staff, the cleaning services, and the security gates. Since certain residents have decided to park elsewhere, we no longer have the funds to keep these areas open. If you want your lobby back, I suggest you talk to Miss Swanson. Or, better yet, start renting your parking spaces again. The crowd turned to look at me. For a second, I felt a flicker of fear. Would they turn on me? Would they decide that the convenience of the lobby was worth giving in to Lucius's demands? But I had underestimated my neighbors. Are you kidding me? Allison yelled, turning back to Clark. You're punishing us. Because we won't let your thug of a nephew rob us? We pay our HOA fees, Clark. If you lock us out of our own building amenities, we'll sue you into the ground. Go ahead and try, Clark mocked. By the time your lawsuit gets a court date, the mold in the laundry room will have ruined everything you own. Have a nice day, everyone. He stepped back and closed the inner security door, leaving the residents in a state of absolute fury. Caroline, Mr. Henderson said, his hands shaking with anger. What do we do? We can't live like this. My medicine is delivered to the lobby mailbox. If I can't get in there, I don't know what I'm going to do. Don't worry, Mr. Henderson, I said, putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We aren't going to wait for a lawsuit. I'm going to make a phone call. Everyone, please go back to your apartments or wait in the new parking lot. I promise you, this door will be open by tonight. I didn't call the police first. Instead, I called the regional office of the property developer, Vista Living Group, the corporation that actually owned our building and employed Clark Perry. It took me 45 minutes of being transferred through automated menus and board receptionists before I finally reached someone of authority, a regional director named Evelyn Carter. Miss Swanson, she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. I'm aware of some minor complaints from your complex, but our local manager, Mr. Perry, has assured us that everything is being handled according to standard procedures. Standard procedures? I asked, my voice dripping with controlled sarcasm. It's standard procedure for your manager to lock 80-year-old residents out of their mailboxes and laundry facilities because they refuse to pay his nephew $5,000 a month for parking? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, did you say $5,000 a month? Yes, Ms. Carter. And when we refused, his nephew, Lucius Armstrong, physically Assaulted me and forced us to pay $7,000 a month under threat of violence and fraudulent city citations. I have bank records showing those payments were deposited into an account registered to Haven Property Management, which, as far as I can tell, is not an official subsidiary of Vista Living Group. Let me look into this, Evelyn Carter said, her tone suddenly losing its corporate distance and turning incredibly sharp. Do you have proof of these transactions? I have copies of the checks, the fraudulent tickets, the video footage of the assault, and a signed petition from 42 residents detailing the harassment we've faced over the last 2 months. I'm sending them to your email right now. I hit send on my laptop, forwarding the massive file Arthur and I had compiled. I've also CC'd the city zoning board, the local police precinct, and the Regional Consumer Protection Bureau, I added. I figured you'd want to see this before it becomes a front-page story in the local news. For nearly 2 minutes, the only sound on the phone was the clicking of a mouse. As Evelyn Carter went through the files, I could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she realized the massive legal and public relations nightmare her company was facing. Miss Swanson, she said, her voice tight. I am catching a flight to Westridge in 1 hour. I will be at your complex by 5 this evening. Please do not contact the media just yet. Let me handle this personally. I'll see you at 5, Miss Carter, I said, and hung up. I walked down to the new parking lot to update the residents. When I arrived, I saw a familiar black SUV pulling up to the curb outside our gate. Lucius Armstrong got out of the driver's seat. He didn't look smug anymore. He looked manic. His clothes were rumpled, and he was carrying a heavy metal crowbar. Caroline! He screamed, slamming his car door and marching toward our gate. Get out here. You think you're going to ruin me? You think you can just steal my livelihood? 2 of his thugs were with him, looking nervous. They didn't have weapons, but they were scanning the area, clearly realizing they were in broad daylight with dozens of witnesses watching. Lucius, stop! Allison shouted from inside the gate. We've called the police. I don't care about the police. Lucius roared, striking the heavy steel gate with the crowbar. A loud, metallic clang echoed through the street. This gate is illegal. This whole place is illegal. I'm tearing it down. He swung the crowbar again, hitting the electronic keypad. Sparks flew, and the screen shattered. Lucius, don't. I called out, stepping forward, keeping the fence between us. You're committing felony property damage. There are cameras recording you right now. I'll smash your cameras too. He looked up, spotting one of the high-definition domes mounted on the light pole. He threw the crowbar at it, but missed, the heavy metal bar clattering harmlessly against the asphalt. You ruined everything, Lucius whimpered, his anger suddenly collapsing into a pathetic, desperate whine. My lenders, they're calling me every hour. They're going to repossess my house. They're going to take my cars. I spent $2 million on those spaces, $2 million. And they're worth nothing because of you. They were never worth $2 million, Lucius, I said quietly. You bought a lie. And you tried to force us to pay for your mistake. I'll kill you, he whispered, his eyes locked onto mine, completely devoid of reason. He lunged at the chain-link fence, shaking it with all his strength, trying to climb over. I'll kill you, Caroline. His 2 thugs finally realized things had gone too far. They grabbed him by his arms, pulling him back from the fence. Boss, let's go, one of them urged, looking nervously down the street. We gotta leave. The cops are gonna be here. Let go of me. Lucius screamed, kicking wildly. But his thugs didn't listen. They dragged him back to his SUV, threw him into the passenger seat, and sped off, leaving the broken keypad on our gate behind them. Is everyone okay? I asked, turning to the neighbors who had gathered. They nodded, but they were shaken. The reality of Lucius's desperation was terrifying. He was a cornered animal, and he had nothing left to lose. At exactly 5 o'clock, a sleek black town car pulled up to the complex. Evelyn Carter stepped out. She was a tall, imposing woman in her late 40s, wearing a tailored navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase. I met her in the courtyard, along with Arthur Vance and several resident representatives. Miss Swanson, Evelyn said, shaking my hand with a firm, no-nonsense grip. Thank you for waiting. Where is Mr. Perry? He's still inside his office, behind the locked lobby doors, I said, pointing toward the main entrance. He hasn't come out since he locked them this morning. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Let's go. We walked to the lobby doors. Evelyn didn't knock. She pulled a master electronic keycard from her pocket, the kind only corporate executives held, and swiped it against the reader. The lock clicked, and she pushed the doors open, the heavy chains rattling against the handles. Clark Perry was sitting at his desk inside, drinking coffee and looking at a spreadsheet on his computer. When he saw the doors open and saw Evelyn Carter walk in, he jumped so fast he knocked his coffee mug over, dark liquid spilling across his desk. Miss Carter. Clark stammered, his face turning an instant, greasy shade of pale. What are you doing here? You didn't notify me of a site visit. Because if I had notified you, Clark, you would have had time to delete your local server backups, Evelyn said, her voice freezing the air in the room. She walked over to his desk, ignoring the spilled coffee, and shut his laptop screen. Step away from the computer. Ms. Carter, I can explain. You have 30 seconds to explain why the lobby doors of this property were chained shut from the inside, she said, crossing her arms. And if your explanation involves the words budget deficit, I suggest you think very carefully, because our corporate finance department has spent the last 3 hours auditing your local accounts. Clark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man standing on a trapdoor with the rope already around his neck. We found the Haven Property Management account, Clark, Evelyn continued, her voice deadly quiet. The one you registered under a false tax ID using our corporate address. We also found the transfers. Over the last 2 years, you've diverted nearly $400,000 of Vista Living's maintenance funds into your nephew's private accounts to help him finance his acquisitions of parking spaces. No, that was a loan. Clark gasped, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of his desk. It was a short-term bridging loan. He was going to pay it back with interest. The company would have made a profit. You used corporate funds to finance a private extortion scheme against our own tenants, Evelyn said, her voice rising in cold anger. You violated state financial laws, committed corporate embezzlement, and engaged in systematic harassment. You aren't just fired, Clark. You are going to prison. Right on cue, 2 police officers walked through the lobby doors, accompanied by a detective. I recognized one of them. It was the officer who had towed Lucius's trucks earlier. Clark Perry, the detective asked, holding up a warrant. You're under arrest for corporate embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion. Please step away from the desk and place your hands behind your back. Clark slumped, his shoulders collapsing as the reality of his situation set in. He didn't even try to fight as the officer clicked the handcuffs around his wrists. This is her, Clark muttered, glaring at me as he was led past. She ruined us. That bitch. Actually, Clark, I said as he reached the door, you ruined yourselves. You just forgot that some of us aren't afraid of a bully. As the police led Clark out to a waiting squad car, the residents who had gathered in the courtyard began to cheer. The sound was deafening, a release of 2 months of stored-up anger and frustration. But the night wasn't over yet. Evelyn Carter turned to me, her expression softening slightly. Miss Swanson, I want to apologize on behalf of Vista Living Group. This was a catastrophic failure of oversight on our part. We will be issuing a full refund to every resident who paid those fraudulent parking fees, and we will be taking immediate legal steps to void the sale of those parking spaces to Lucius Armstrong. Thank you, Ms. Carter, I said. But what about the spaces themselves? If you void the sale, what happens to them? Evelyn smiled, a genuine, warm smile. We will be converting them back to standard resident parking, included in your lease agreements at no extra charge. And as for your new parking lot, I understand it is built on your private land? Yes, I said. If you are open to it, Vista Living would like to discuss a long-term lease agreement for that land. We can integrate it into our property layout, manage the maintenance, and pay your family trust a monthly rental fee. It would save us the cost of rebuilding our own facilities and provide a permanent solution for both complexes. I looked at Arthur, who gave me a slow, approving nod. I think we can work something out, I said. 3 weeks later, the complex had transformed. The chain-link fence on my grandfather's land had been replaced with a beautiful, landscaped brick wall that matched the surrounding buildings. The Swanson lot was now a joint venture, providing secure, affordable parking for both our complex and the Fairmont Court next door. The lobby doors were permanently open, staffed by a new, friendly security team hired by Vista Living. The laundry room had been renovated, the mailboxes were accessible 24/7, and the sense of fear that had hung over the building like a dark cloud was entirely gone. As for Lucius Armstrong, his downfall was swift and complete. Without his uncle's backing and the steady flow of extortion money, his lenders foreclosed on his assets. The $2 million parking spaces were legally seized and returned to the developer as part of Clark Perry's restitution agreement. But the real blow came from the criminal charges. Using the high-definition security footage from the night I was assaulted, the police arrested Lucius at his home. Combined with the fraudulent tickets, the impersonation of a transit officer, and the felony property damage to our new gate, the prosecutor had more than enough to ensure he would be spending a significant amount of time behind bars. It was a cool Tuesday evening when I walked down to the new parking lot to check on my car. The LED security lights cast a warm, safe glow over the asphalt. Allison was there, washing her car under one of the wash bays we had installed with the extra funds from our community pool. "Hey, Caroline," she called out, waving a sponge. "Did you see the news today?" "No, I've been offline most of the afternoon." "What happened?" "Lucius took a plea deal," she said, a massive grin spreading across her face. 5 years. No parole for the first 3. And his uncle Clark got 7 years. For embezzlement. The court also ordered them to pay back every single cent of the parking fees they stole from us. I let out a slow, deep breath, feeling the last lingering remnants of tension finally leave my shoulders. "That's amazing news, Allison," I said, looking around the peaceful, clean lot. "We couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice dropping into a sincere, quiet tone. "If you hadn't stood up to him that first morning, if you hadn't built this place, we'd still be paying him. We'd still be living in fear." "We did it together," I replied. "I just provided the land. You guys provided the courage." I walked over to the edge of the lot, looking at the small brass plaque we had mounted near the entrance gate. It was dedicated to my grandfather, who had kept this land untouched for so many years. Swanson Community Lot. Built on the foundation of neighbors standing together. I reached out and gently ran my fingers over the engraved letters. The wind blew gently through the courtyard, carrying the distant sound of laughter from the building lobby. The nightmare was over. The neighborhood was ours again.